Did looking at my muscles help calm you down? Stress relief. Awful and horrible. Stress unrelenting with a dread never-ending. Douse it, kerosene drenching every inch of every room, of every floor in her pitiful, weak, and only superficially charming boutique. Burn it. Let all of her soaked stacks and scrolls and rolls of paper and patterns tear at the gentlest touch. Just like the plans and dresses and designs that they all bore. Everything that was, everything that is, and everything that could one day be consumed in the hottest heat of the most blazing fires, sweeping through her office, taking away her home, leaving the poor, stressed, and quite frankly, nearly dead mare homeless and helpless in reclaiming or even regaining all that she had built out of her life. Her life and her work all taken away in a single blazing fire. One that she would sit before, smiling and nearly crying. All because it meant a single undeniable fact. Rarity would have a good reason for missing her deadlines.
The insurance would cover it.
Rarity kept her eyes strained and squinted as her hoof slid the fabric underneath the sewing needle. Each movement delicate, everything needing to be precise.
One too many candles lit late at night, opalescence in her big swinging tail. Why should they suspect anything else?
She laughed. It was painful to her ears.
I'm too fortunate to set a fire. It just wouldn't make any sense.
She exhaled. Her lungs burned. Had she stopped breathing while she worked again?
Fortunate.
Rarity tasted the word while pushing the lavender cloth away from the needle. The buzzing of the machine had started up softly, growing in pitch as it kept on working, nearly blaring and blowing her hearing by the time the task was done. With a flick of her hoof against the switch on the side, the machine died down, and like a vacuum shutting off, the low humming petered for only a few seconds more.
I am a rather fortunate mare, aren't I? Unlimited time to make all the dresses and designs that I could ever want to make. So, why am I...
And then the door flew open. Rarity shivered. Turning around on her stool, she gazed over her shoulder at the door that had been thrown open and nearly slammed into the wall. With a confused blink, she craned her neck back to look up at the staggering height of the intruder, towering and bulky, and wearing a pink apron.
I am so sorry!
Spike burst into the room in a sprint, each step thunderous and shaking the room. All the while, his unbalanced feet tried to correct the other. Finally, one leg caught behind the other, and the hulking dragon fell forward, his body falling towards the floor.
Sorry.
Rarity flicked her gaze to the left, up on the wall, and to the brown shelf on the wall. Awards and trophies, and even a smooth green urn sat atop the surface. The last item filled with the ashes of a deceased aunt whose memory stirred a low growl from her throat. The dragon slammed against the floor. The room shook. The jar bounced into the air, knocked off the edge, and in a second, the crash of broken pieces shattering and then scattering filled the air. Rarity looked back to the fallen dragon. He was like a beautiful but scaly rug at the foot of her bed.
Oh crap.
Spike blinked at every crap that he said. His muzzle laid flatly against the ground and sweat coursing down his face. He threw his claws to the ground, not caring to check his own body as he lifted himself up, taking towards the vase at once.
It's no big deal at all. I can fix this. Just don't sweat a thing, alright?
Sweating wasn't what Rarity was doing, but a whole lot of blinking was. Spike walked behind the impact zone, kneeling before it. Picking up a shard with each of his claws, he raised them and held them before his face.
I learned this really cool trick from a book once. It's about how fire can be a binding agent to keep things together.
He glanced at the piece in his right claw, drawing it closer to his puckered lips.
Watch this.
Spike closed his eyes. From his parted lips, he blew a concentrated stream of green flames, which brushed over the cut edge of the shattered pieces, catching to it at once. His eyes reopened to the shards, with a smile spread across his lips.
Oh, yes, see? The fire is... well... crap.
The fire caught along the edges of the piece, and slowly consumed the material into its innermost center, the shard rendering into fuel. It began to burn out of control, and with a panicked expression, Spike whipped the shard against the ground, it clicking and shattering into a dozen more pieces, each bearing a tiny, burning flame.
Oh, come on.
Spike's shoulders dropped as he rose to his full height, an impressive place somewhere between 6 feet, one that Rarity had been dying to find out with a tape measure, and without an inch to spare between them. down, girl.
Give me a break, that was the proper flame!
Spike's response to the problem, of course, was to raise his foot high into the air, and with a heavy exhale, start stomping the ever-inanimate life out of the ground. Rarity continued watching from the stool, her confusion turning to amusement, but quickly transitioning into concern. She lifted a hoof towards the dragon.
Spike, maybe that's not the proper way to—
Oh, my foot! Oh, my foot! Oh, my sweet and precious foot!
Spike's knee jerked into the air, and his arms wrapped around it at once, hugging it against the belly of his pink apron. Rarity stifled a breath. The thickness of his protruding abs pressed against the fabric, defining their shape perfectly.
Oh, I'm bleeding, aren't I? I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die.
Rarity wasn't sure what to make of life at the moment. Just having the dragon break into a room and, well, act like Spike for longer than a minute was enough to swirl her body through a happiness and elation and confusion within that span.
Spike, will you calm down? You are not going to die.
Rarity crossed her forehooves over her fuzzy white chest, feeling the beating of her heart climb ever so softly, a silly and certain delight taking over her slender frame.
However, you are going to hurt yourself if you keep bouncing around like—
The crunching of the tiny shards broke to her words, and the resulting scream, or crying of a dragon, broke her ears. She pressed her forehooves against her ears and watched the dragon twirl across the room, falling over onto his back, right onto the field of broken and sharp pieces. Spike rolled left and right, more crunches and cracking as his back crushed down onto the pieces. Rarity felt horrible while she watched, but at the same time she held a hoof to her mouth to repress the tiniest giggle threatening to burst out from her lips.
It's okay, everything is gonna be okay.
Spike rolled all the way to the right, out from the minefield of the broken vase. He laid there for a moment, panting and catching his breath. Then, rising up on his side, he gazed over the place that had brought him so much pain.
Just, gotta use the right fire is all.
Spike, I don't think that's—
A sweep of flames blew over the scattered pieces and swept them into its gust, lifting up and twirling around slowly, nearly condensing itself out of existence, before trailing up through an open window and out into the world. Spike laid there, horrified, for the next few seconds.
Spike?
His body shivered, clunky like an old drawbridge rising. He turned his head and looked over at Rarity. She sat on her stool, leaning a cheek onto her hoof, a foreleg arched against the table.
Yes?
He stammered.
Did you just mail the ashes of my dead aunt to Princess Alessia?
Spike blinked.
Maybe she can bring her back to life!
Rarity rolled her eyes. Turning away from the table, she pulled her forelegs back and hopped down onto the floor, horn glowing as or blue. From out of her open closet floated a medicine box. Wrapped in an identical aura, she floated it towards the injured dragon.
You're lucky my aunt and I didn't see eye to eye on many things, or else I would be very upset with you right now.
Spike sat up properly, looking over his shoulder to confirm that there was a wall behind him. Letting his back rest against it, his face settled up at her approach, unsure of what to do when she laid down on her belly before his feet.
Wait, you two didn't like each other? Then why—
Why do I have her ashes?
The white box settled before her forelegs, the glowing blue unlocking its latch as the top swung up. Rolls of bandages floated upwards, followed by a pair of tweezers. Rarity then nodded at the instruments.
Honestly, that mare wanted to spite me in every way that was possible.
The tweezers dove in and plucked shards out from the underside of his foot, aided by Rarity's magic, of course.
And even when she passed on,
Rarity continued,
she still wanted to annoy me with her existence.
Spike curled his claws against the ground, exhaling heavier out through his snout than he should have.
That, doesn't really explain why you have them.
Oh, Spike. There are some ponies in life that enjoy tormenting others for what they cannot obtain themselves. My aunt was such a pony, and in a way is still such a pony.
Rarity plucked out a particularly deep shard buried in the minuscule slit between two scales. She hummed at the constant clattering of shards pelting against the ground.
She knew about my disdain for her, how the image of her brought out the worst in me. Of course, when one passes away, such primitive hatred begins to cease.
She coughed.
Unless they find a way to leave their memory on your shelf, of course, so that they may continue to bite at your skin from beyond the grave.
Rarity's muzzle scrunched up. He wasn't getting this at all, was he? She glanced up from between his feet, an impressive distance of even more powerful legs, thicker and slender, sleek in a dark shade of purple. A glance up at his face, and blank eyes and a blank expression.
Now, what was I going on about? Sorry for that, darling. It would appear stress has me speaking rather strangely as of late.
Or I'm an idiot.
Oh, don't say such things about yourself.
Rarity's smile turned into a smirk.
Besides, you're only half an idiot, and that makes you a goofball, dear.
Spike pressed his head against the wall, laughing, though with a strained breath.
Shorten it to just goof, and you've got yourself a deal.
Rarity smiled and resumed her work. She liked things like this. Never could she place how things came to be, one moment stressing endlessly about her work, how nothing was going to be okay, how weak and useless and dumb and stunted and blocked that she was, to now feeling smart, powerful and wise, helping the happy-go-lucky dragon out from his now rotten luck. Her work drained her, pleasantly most of the time, but in periods like those, her body was more of a husk than a mare. But being around Spike, that made her feel something.
If you two hated each other so much, then how come you were left with the ashes?
Rarity rose above his foot while smiling, shifting over to the side and settling before his other foot. She began to work.
My aunt saw it fit for it to be so in her will.
And so you took them?
My aunt also knew I couldn't do something as heartless as rejecting them either.
Rarity froze for a second. Her eyes squinted for shorter than that. All this she had forgotten. When she debated setting the place on fire, she had forgotten about the vase and her aunt, and had they burned, it would have probably stayed that way. It's amazing how we remember things at all.
And that's the stories told.
I'm still thinking about if Spike actually sent those ashes to Princess Celestia, because if that's the case, holy shit, I would love to see her reaction to that. Now let's move on to our powerhouses of donators. Top donators, Dash of Evergreen, Peter Coulthard, J Tin Man, Darkside, and Ponyman. CourierCruz CI, Delta Omega, Strix, RuneScythe 9852, dospo, Ryanny Dragonwolf, Hunter Norman, Secret Moon, Tall Rasha, The Toilet Snake, Sword Brethren Mordred, Cerberus, Goulash Eating Hazar, Starlight Glimmer, Squiddy Boy, David D. Sanchez, Soul Dragon, Gaggy, Trey, Shadow Drake, Joe Piercy, Alex F., Rainbow Dash, Teal'ca Anderson, TV Killer, John Becker, Leon Reynolds, Raven Speedster, and Zach Richow. Thank you all very much for watching this video, live life to the fullest, and if you have a broken urn, save it before Spike blows it to Celestia.